Hi there, Ford owners. Today in your 2017 Ford F-250 Super Duty, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to replace your diesel fuel filter and fuel water separator element. The fuel filters on your vehicle, as well as the fuel water separator, are designed to keep any particulates, debris, any of the things that you don't want, contaminants, out of your fuel system from reaching the engine. Your water separator is going to be closer near the tank, and that's going to be the first line of defense. Inside of there is a particulate filter that will collect dirt, debris, dust, as well as moisture. And it is designed in a certain way to collect that moisture. Water is going to be a denser fluid than diesel fuel, so that way when it goes through the media, the water can stay at the bottom as the less dense fuel goes towards the top, so it will collect down there. There is a drain valve on there, so you can drain out water and stuff like that in them, but the element still does need to be replaced periodically because it can become clogged with debris, which can restrict the fuel system. Restrictions in your fuel systems can cause excessively long crank times to get your vehicle to start, could cause your engine to not run properly, and it could even prevent it from starting at all. There are, again, the two filters, so we have another filter up here closer to the engine. That's our second line of defense, and you'll get both of those in this fuel filter kit, so we can take care of the one up here by the engine as well as the one back by the tank. All this is just going to ensure that you're getting the most life out of your engine, because if you do get any particulates up in there, they can clog up the fuel injectors and cause issues with those, and fuel system service is an expensive repair. Fuel injectors on a diesel are usually quite expensive as well, so you want to definitely protect those components. It's also important to keep water out of the system. If water were to reach the engine, water is really not compressible. So if water reached the engine, it could potentially cause damage to the engine there. And it can be abrasive as well, so it can cause other issues. Even if it doesn't cause an engine failure, it can cause premature wear. So we definitely want to keep all those contaminants out of the system. So if you want to follow along with us, we'll show you how to get both this one and the one in back replaced. First thing we're going to do to begin our installation is go ahead and park your vehicle in the area where you're wanting to be working. We want to depressurize the fuel system before we install any fuel filters, and to do that with your Ford vehicle here, you just need to let it sit for a minimum of 5 minutes to depressurize. And if you give it a little bit longer, it's just going to put you even better on the safer side. So while we let our vehicle sit, first thing we're going to do is just take the things out of the box and just kind of point out where they go. So here's the fuel filter right here. It looks just like the one that we've got here on the vehicle. There's the one on the vehicle that we're going to be replacing there. So just kind of, you can hold them up there, just get an idea of what you're looking at. If we take a look at the side, you can see it does have a little tang there, and also here on the bottom. So this is, it actually fits inside of a housing. This is the housing right here. If I give it a little, you can kind of see it's loose, somewhat loose. I mean, it's in its housing, snapped in there. These devices is what holds that in place. So we're going to come back to the one under the hood here. We're going to start with the fuel water separator, or the fuel conditioner they call it. That's located down underneath. I'm going to go ahead and swap pieces here. So this is what you'll get for your fuel water separator. It's still in the packaging. We'll of course be opening it up when we want to install it, but until we're ready to put it in, we'll just leave it wrapped up nicely here. You also get a new gasket for the replacement water separator element here. So this goes inside of the box that's located down below, and this is the seal for the cover for that box. So we're going to go ahead and put these in our box here, and then we're going to head underneath, and we're going to start down there on the fuel water separator. Now, before we want to drain our system here, depending on your vehicle year, if it's an early year build or a late year build, there are slight differences in the system. The return line on the newer models, the later builds, have a check valve inside, so you don't have to do anything. You can just drain your stuff out and go ahead and move forward. If you have an early build though, they don't have a check valve in there, and we need to disconnect the fuel return line. It's so cramped up in here, I don't feel a check valve, I can't see one, so we're just gonna have to assume that it doesn't have one, and we're gonna treat it that way to make sure that we don't drain our tank out, make a big mess here, because if you don't have that check valve, the system can siphon and actually suck out a lot more fuel from your tank than you want to. We only have limited storage here for what we're planning on draining out. So the hose that we want to disconnect, on the unit here, there are 4 hoses connected to it. There's 3 going towards the rear of the vehicle, and there's just one here going towards the front. Of the 3 going to the rear, we want the middle of those 3, and we'll disconnect that one. Now there is different style of clips on these ends. You can see the one here on the end, and this one here is a blue in color, and this one here is yellow. The middle one is also yellow and is the same style of clip as this one here. So since it's difficult to see up on top here, I'm going to show you how to release the clip on this one. We don't want to disconnect this line, but just for example purposes so you can see how to remove these clips, we're going to show you. So take the top of the yellow connector here, and you're going to pull up on it. It's kind of got like a little bit serrated on the edges there. So that piece will pop up like that. After you've popped up the lock tab there, just behind the lock tab, there's this little area here. You'll want to push down on this. And you might need to use 2 hands to push down on it. There we go, it popped down. At this point now we can separate the 2. So I'm just going to push it back a little bit to show you that they do separate. And there you go, you can see we are separate right there. That flange you see on the line is where the lock tab holds it in place. So we're not going to go any further because then fuel can come out. So we're going to push it back together, push our lock tab back in place, and leave that one alone. So we're going to use the same procedure I showed you here to remove this clip and pull the line back on this middle one up here. Make sure you get your pan in place down here. And then we'll grab our middle one, pulling up on the back, pushing down on the 1 tab, and then we're going to slide it towards the rear. There we go, we've got it disconnected. So you can see it up there, yellow connector. Just let that guy hang out there. So now that we've got that disconnected, we can go ahead and drain our fuel and disconnect the connector down here. I'll disconnect the connector first. We just pressed it on the release tab there, and we'll pull that out of the way. We'll let this just kind of hang out over there. And now we're going to turn this counterclockwise to drain the fuel. And this is a pretty big fuel filtering device, so I would expect there to be quite a bit in here. So make sure you got a pretty big container here, because we're probably going to drain potentially a half a gallon out of here. So now we've got it pretty well drained. We can go ahead and shut that back off. Make sure you got it all the way closed. And now we're going to remove all the fasteners that are located underneath. So there are a total of 5 screws that we need to remove. We'll use our 8mm socket to do so. You'll have 2 towards the rear, kind of midway point, and then you're going to have 3 towards the front of the vehicle, on the corners, and in the center. So we can go ahead and get these removed. Next one. And they actually stay, I guess, connected into the covering there. They don't pull all the way out. Okay, we've got that last one removed. We can now drop our cover down. You may or may not have one of the screws hanging up, so you might have to just double check them, make sure that we got them all released. After you've got all the screws released, you will kind of have to jiggle it around just a little bit to find the sweet spot, and then it'll lower down gently. I have to just kind of barely flex outward on the covering there just a little bit, and we can get the entire assembly to drop down there. So we are still going to have some fuel in here, so you can dump that out. Here we've got our old element. The element does kind of hold itself in there, so we'll have to release it from the covering here. Our assembly will slide to the side to release it. So I pulled it towards the drain valve there to release it. And then we can set this aside. We're just going to set it there to let it kind of just drain into the pan there. So you also just want to make sure you pay attention to how it was sitting in there. So you can see the large tube there was off on the side that has our drain valve. So that way you know the correct orientation to install your new one. So here we can see our new one and our old one together. Some of the things I'm looking at is like the tabs here on the bottom. You can see they both angle the same direction. I'm wanting to make sure that the new one is going to mount up the same as the old one. And it looks like everything here on our new filter looks identical to that on the old filter. So we're good to go there. So we can set that aside and grab our new assembly. So the hooks, they angle that way because we slid it this direction. So it's got to slide the opposite direction to reinstall. The piece that you see there and right there is where our little tangs are going to hook. So make sure you set it in just to the right of those, and then it should slide over and click into place. There we go. And there we go. We slid it in place. You can see it's hooked on both sides. Kind of give it a little gentle tug on this side, making sure it's down. Gentle tug on that side, making sure it's down. All right, so that looks good for getting our new filter on there. We've got it clicked over into place. Everything's looking good there. Now, before we put it back up, we are going to replace the gasket as well. And that runs around the lip there. So I recommend using a small pick to remove the gasket. Now, as long as you don't damage this gasket, you could potentially reuse it, but you get a new one in your kit, so there's no reason for us to try to reuse an old gasket when we've got a new one. So we'll just take that out, set it aside, and grab our new gasket. Make sure you work it down into the groove all the way around. We don't want it sticking up to where we could potentially pinch it. So now we're just checking the other side of our gasket, making sure it's pushed all the way down, and now we can reinsert it back up into the housing. And we're not going to be pushing real hard. It should slide right up there easily. If it doesn't, you're probably not lined up correctly. There we go. That's slid up in there nice and easy. We'll get a couple of bolts started so it can't fall down. And you always want to start your bolts by hand. You never want to use your power tools to start a fastener. That's a quick way to lead to a stripped or damaged bolt. And these also do not tighten very tight. So now we'll snug it down. So now we're just going to torque these. And you'll want to make sure you do it evenly. So as you tighten down one, move to the next, and then recheck back and forth to make sure that it is tightened down evenly all the way around. Once we've got that fully secured back down, don't forget to reinstall your line here up top. You'll have to slide that back onto the canister connection point there. Push it all the way in until it clicks. Then push down your lock tab and then just verify that you can't push it back off. Don't push crazy hard, but just make sure that it is secured. So that's secured on there. Everything down here looks good. Don't forget your electrical connector. And then now we can head up top and take care of the fuel filter and the engine compartment. So now we're back up top. We're gonna take care of this filter now. And I do want to keep in mind that we have not touched the vehicle. We haven't turned it on or anything yet. We took care of the one down below after waiting the 5 minutes. We chose the one down below first. That way it could drain off any kind of fuel that's in these lines and stuff. Try to get rid of as much as we can to minimize the mess up here. But we still have not touched the key. We don't want to pressurize anything just yet. So we're going to disconnect these lines. Real quick before we disconnect these lines, I'd recommend grabbing a rag or something and sticking it underneath here. So I'm going to grab some shop towels and we're just going to stuff them underneath here to catch any fuel that might just residual still be in the line. Now that we've got that in place there, we can start disconnecting our lines. So we'll start with the one here on the edge. This one you'll want to kind of spread these tabs a little bit and then push out, up and away like that, and it'll slide away from the line. That'll then reveal two buttons. There's one on this side and one on the other side there. You can kind of see it moving a little bit. They don't stick out very far. You'll press in on each of those and then you can disconnect the line. For our next one here, for our blue clip, this one's going to have a release tab here and on the bottom in the same place. You'll need to pull those away from the fuel filter just a little bit, and then you can push it towards the front of the vehicle. And then we should be able to disconnect this line. There we go. This one's a little bit tighter, a little more snug. So just be careful with this one. This hose is not very long. It stretches right down to there. So just be careful with this one. Don't pull too hard, be gentle. Set that guy off to the side because it's not very long. So yeah, just keep that out of the way there. This one's gonna take each one of these, we're gonna pinch them and then push it down to release this one. And then we can pull this one off of here. There we go, our rag's catching that fuel. We're gonna pull that away just a little bit, just so we can more easily access just the fuel filter there. So now our fuel filter, we're gonna turn it counterclockwise. So the ends, the connection points there are gonna swivel towards the rear of the vehicle. And then we can pull it up. Trying not to spill as much as we can there. And then we'll go ahead and set this in our drain pan to drain out. So now we're going to take our new filter and we're going to slide it in place. That tab we talked about earlier, you can see is going to fit into these notches here so it can slide down. And then we'll just twist it back to hold it in place. You can then remove the covers and then we can reinstall all of our lines. Double check each one, making sure that they are fully seated and connected. So now at this point, we will need to perform a bleed on our system. I am going to wipe down too any residual fuel I've got and stuff up here. We're going to clean all this up and then we'll need to bleed and prime the system. We're also going to be checking for leaks as well, making sure that none of the connection points that we disconnected or the gasket we installed below is going to leak at all. All right, we're now in the vehicle, and to prime our system here to bleed out the air and get the fuel up there, all we need to do in this vehicle is just turn it on. We're not going to start it. We're just going to hit the ignition button just to turn the truck on, but we don't have our foot on the brakes. We don't want it to try to start yet. After we turn it on, you want to give it about 30 seconds to let the fuel pump kick on, let it prime itself. I could hear it kick on there. I'm listening to it for a second. It's still running. Now, what I'm also listening for while that's running is I'm listening to hear that it is running, but I'm also listening to hear if I hear any drips or like the sound of liquid running out of the system. So I don't hear any of that. We're gonna let it go here for about, again, 30 seconds. We'll turn it off. And we're gonna rinse and repeat this process 5 to 6 times. And I recommend at least doing it that many times. You can do it more, it's not gonna hurt it. So if you wanna be more thorough in your prime process, you can do it 10 times if you want. The more you do it, the more primed, the higher chance of everything working out is gonna be. So I'm gonna do it probably 2 times, and then I'm gonna head out. I'm just gonna double check, make sure I got no leaks, signs of leaks or anything. If I don't, I'm gonna hop back in and just repeat that to about 5 or 6 times, maybe even 7. All right, so we checked it after about 2 times, didn't see any signs of any leaks. I always like to run my hand underneath the hoses and around any seals because it could be such a slow leak that you're just gonna feel like some residue and stuff. So I do also recommend cleaning up all the areas where you worked before so you know that it's not like leftover residue from from when you just serviced it. I didn't find any leaks on any spot. We've gone through this about 6 times now, so we're going to go ahead and start it now and just verify that she stays running. All right, it is started, but we do want to let it idle here for a good little bit, because if you don't have it primed, it can start with what it had there, and then potentially after 10-15 seconds here, it could die, and you'll need to prime the system up. If it stays running for a good minute or so, then we're probably fine. Everything should be good. Our prime is good, and we're ready to roll from there. So we've had it running now for about 2 to 3 minutes. I went ahead and shut it off. I did check for leaks just visually while it was running, but again, I want to come out here and I just check with my finger, make sure that there's no residue, that there's not like a small seep or anything like that. So just check each one. Looking like we are good to go there. We're going to head down below and check the same location down there for any types of leaks. And if you have no leaks on your system anywhere, and she starts and idles just fine, you're good to go at this point. Now, if you did have an issue here where maybe you found some leaks, check each of your lines and make sure that there's no debris or anything inside where the O-rings are that slide on. The O-rings are going to be inside the hose side. So just check for any debris, clean those out if you do have any kind of leaks. Check for any damage to those O-rings. If you've nicked it or scored it, you may need to replace the O-ring if it's serviceable. If not, you may need to replace the entire line. Now, if you don't have any leaks, but your vehicle doesn't want to start or stay running, then there is a further prime procedure that you can perform. It's usually not necessary. We just had to just cycle the ignition to get ours to go. But in the event that you did have to need a little bit further bleeding procedure, the line located here, you would want to disconnect, and we already did that before. Now, of course, you would want to make sure that you wait 5 minutes to let the system bleed down before disconnecting any lines. But you would disconnect the middle line here. Then on the fuel filter, on the nipple, add a piece of hose, and then run that hose down to a bucket. And then you're just going to do the same thing inside with cycling the key, but it's going to be pumping fuel out, and that way you can verify that you are getting a solid stream of fuel and that you don't have any air left in the system. Then you can reconnect your line. And that completes our installation of PTC's replacement fuel filter and fuel water separator elements.